let's look at cross-validation. So the goal of cross-validation is to reduce overfitting as well as variance by varying the training data. So let's say we had some data, and we're also going to introduce the concept of training, validation, and test sets. So training is where we're going to build our model. Let's say we're going to use 70%. Let's see. Yeah, let's say 70%. And then we also have validation. Our validation data is for tweaking our data, changing the hyperparameters, for example, deciding any thresholds or cutoff points. Let's say that makes up 10% of our data. And finally, we're going to have our test data. And the test data is going to be our very final performance measurement. So all your model building and all your tweaking and checking, at the end of the day, how does your model actually compare and perform against the test data? So with the test data, that's going to be untouched. We're going to go to the very end with our test data, this 10% test data. That's going to be checking our final performance. Performance being recall or sensitivity, precision, accuracy, mean squared error for continuous variable, what have you. With the rest of the data, we'll do our training on the 70% and our validation on this 10%. Now, where does cross-validation come in? So cross-validation, again, is varying the training set. So what's going to end up happening is, let's say we're doing 8-fold cross-validation. So this is going to be our first fold. Let's also look at what the second fold, third fold, and let's see, the 8th fold. So we're going to do our training, build our model, do any tweaking. This is going to be our first fold. With the second fold, we're going to do our 10% training using this section of the data. And then our training data will be this 70%. Again, we're going to do our model building and then any sort of tweaking our hyperparameters using this validation data. All right, let's go to our third fold. Our third fold is going to move our validation to this section of the data, and then you're going to train with the rest of your data. So repeat this process. By the time you get to the 8th fold, you're going to have this section of the data used for validation, and then this section of the data used for training. And again, we are varying the data for the model building as well as varying the data for the hyperparameter tweaking. And by varying the data, we're varying the training data and introducing more noise, introducing new observations, which will help reduce overfitting and variance. And then after all this cross-fold validation, what's going to be your final model? Your final model could be, say, a weighted average or simple average of all your cross-validation. If it's a continuous variable, if it's a categorical variable, it could be, hey, what's the majority vote in terms of these 8 different models? So you're going to combine these models, and then you're going to finally evaluate the model using this test set here to evaluate the final performance.